Mark Andreessen actually calls it the original sin of the internet that it was never properly implemented. Agents will completely disrupt the money management space. It exponentially increases the revenue that they would be getting from existing customers.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're joined by Murr, who works on AI products at Coinbase, including X402, the recent AI advisor, and then agents for Coinbase as well. So Lincoln, could you give us some introduction to yourself, your background?
Yeah, gladly. So I've been interested in the crypto space for a while now. I first got started when I was like 11 or 12. I wanted to go buy a VPN so I could like pirate video games, but I didn't want to ask my parents for their credit card. And this VPN site accepted Bitcoin, so I exchanged a Target gift card I got for my birthday for Bitcoin and used it and bought the VPN, and it was great. And then I never thought about it again for like 5-ish years, got back interested in the space when I was like 15 or 16, bought random stuff during the whole 2017 bull market, went up, went back down, but I stayed super interested and involved, did a lot of blockchain stuff in college, did my master's thesis with the Ethereum Foundation, and then started working at Coinbase on the product side about 2 or so years ago.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you've been dealing with crypto for a very long time at this point.
Yeah, almost a third of my life, which is a sad way to put it.
That's hilarious. So you've been through more cycles than most of us, probably.
I guess, yeah. I mean, there's still some OGs out there, but...
That's fair. That's fair. Well, I'd love to dive into some of the work that you've done at Coinbase. I think one of the products that you worked on when you first started there was X402, which is very, very popular now. Like, I think Cloudflare recently opened up their waitlist for using their payments on X402. I was looking at X402 scan, and there's over 160 million transactions that have been done with 402, which I think is absolutely insane. So I'd love to learn more. What is X402? How does it work? And how is the process of building the product?
Yeah, totally. So fundamentally, X402 is an internet native payment standard. The reason that it came about is because back in the early days of the internet, the creators of the internet were working on building out all of these like HTTP status codes, like 404, which is like error not found, or like 200, which means success. And they had one that they kept reserved for future use. That was the official description. And there's been various attempts to implement it over the years. And as you would guess, that was 402. There's never been a clean way to transfer value on the internet. And Mark Andreessen actually calls it the original sin of the internet that it was never properly implemented. We've seen various different attempts over the years at creating a way to transfer money over the internet, but it wasn't really until Bitcoin that we actually saw the first way for this to happen in like a cryptographically secure, permissionless, decentralized manner. Since Bitcoin, there have been numerous attempts to revive the 402 standard, but they never took off for various different reasons. What we saw and what made it the right time to reintroduce this to the world back in 2025 is this resurgence in, or I guess really first time surge in AI agents that were interacting. A few months before, in like November of 2024, we released this tool called Agentic, and the whole idea was to like give an AI access to a crypto wallet. Very basic based on what like exists today, but at the time people got really excited about it, and they're using it for all sorts of things like creating tokens, deploying NFTs, depositing in and out of DeFi, all these cool use cases. But it very quickly became evident that there was a bubble that was forming, or at least like a siloed ecosystem of people just using this within the crypto world. So the idea with X402 is that we gave a bunch of agents wallets, but they don't have anything to pay for. So can we take the fact that there's parallel inflection points going on between both the surge of AI agents interaction on the internet and the general proliferation of stablecoins as a payment mechanism, and combine those two together, squish them together, and build out a internet native payment system primarily built for AI agents, but that works for anything. So that was the original idea behind it. And the process of building it out, huge shout out to the engineering team and the general spec creators who went super deep into the weeds, very, very great at like the technical architecture and whatnot on how to actually define what could eventually become an internet native spec that just exists in the web. And then from the product perspective, there was a lot to think about in terms of how do you actually gain adoption for something as like broad-facing as a standard? And the way that we were thinking about it at the beginning, which is still fundamentally true, is it's a two-sided marketplace. You have buyers, who are people or agents or whatever, who want to pay for things, and you have sellers who want to make their service available to those buyers to go interact with. And then as a nice little consequence as well, you have these catalyzing moments and really like narrative builders from big tech companies who were interested in adopting the standard and that happening over time. So really the way it started out was we built these agentic wallets, we created this payment standard, and then clearly we hit a nerve because we had a very strong level of excitement and adoption from these various different enterprises. AWS, Vercel, Cloudflare, all interested parties helped to catalyze the legitimization and interest in X402, which ultimately just led to more and more endpoints and hype, speculation, all the stuff that comes with crypto. It certainly attributes to the overall transaction numbers. But at this point, I think it's here to stay at least.
Okay, that's awesome. And so if I understand correctly, X402 was originally created just to make payments on the internet more reasonable, like easier to do, which is something that was not possible before. And it just happened to coincide at the same time that AI agents were starting to interact on the internet and starting to do things autonomously. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's really no use for 402 before AI agents existed. Like you can just go to a checkout portal and type in your credit card and like whatever happens behind the scenes, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to see that. But agents need some sort of standard way of communicating, whether that be X402 or something else, to me to go to OpenAI and say, hey, I'd like to make a payment, and OpenAI to say, okay, here is the information that you need to send me, and here's how you send it to me. And X402 effectively defines that standard in a way that agents can very easily interact with.
Okay, that makes sense. And why did previous attempts to use this 402 code not end up successful? Like, why did X402 be the one that actually made it?
I think there's a handful of reasons. One is that the previous generation of crypto infrastructure was just really not set up for these like internet scale payments. Like Bitcoin was meant to be peer-to-peer digital cash, but it's just slow and expensive. And we really didn't have sub-second, sub-cent transactions till the past couple of years. So that was certainly a huge help. I also think too, the existence of AI agents at this time helped to absolutely catalyze the number of volume and transactions that were happening. Like there's no way that anyone has clicked a button to send an X402 transaction 100 and whatever million times. Yeah. And then also to the general adoption and excitement around stablecoins and the Genius Act and all these things that make the Cloudflares of the world actually comfortable with adopting crypto payments for the first time. Yeah. All of these things kind of converged at the right place in the right moment to help make X402 a thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what makes stablecoins a better payment rail than existing payment rails like credit card, debit card, or maybe even using a more digital payment rail like Zelle as a way of doing these micropayments or transactions on the web?
Yeah, so fundamentally, like the core problem I think where crypto can be fully differentiated is the ability to send microtransactions down to like a millionth of a cent. Visa's network right now, though it can, if they so chose to just change a number, is limited at a transaction size of around 35 cents or so. And there's processing fees associated with that. It's usually 2 to 4% for the merchant that has to pay that. That doesn't really scale well with microtransactions. It also, too, leaves open the question of how exactly agents get access to those payment rails. If agents really become, billion-plus entities that are just moving around autonomously on the internet, there's not really a way for them to go get a bank account. And without a bank account, they can't have access to Zelle. And the way that it seems like things are trending, at least now, is that agents are going to be more sovereign, more autonomous, financially independent entities. And that requires some sort of isolation or way to have access to their own set of funds, which I think crypto uniquely enables. And then when you're talking about crypto, it's hard to also not mention the benefits of completely permissionless global interactions that can happen. I can spin up an agent. That agent can decide to go list a service. It doesn't have to go ask anyone for permission or KYC itself or do any of that before it's able to be accessible and paid by billions of people around the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that I find really difficult about this, though, is with Visa and MasterCard and other card payment networks, right? They have large credit card fees, and that's why it's really hard to do these micropayments. But the reason why those fees exist is usually to make the system more robust, right? To prevent fraud, to account for chargebacks, which happen, and to run the compliance processes that exist, right? The KYC and stuff. And so if we're using stablecoins as those payment rails, is that a way of just getting around the necessary systems that these payment networks have put into place? And if so, what happens if people are using these stablecoin payment networks for things that are fraudulent. There's no way to get that money back. There's no way to do a chargeback. So could this, in theory, also be worse for consumers because it's so seamless and open?
Not necessarily. Yes and no. So on the compliance piece, there is still layers of infrastructure that you can put in place to do the proper checks, know your transaction, all of the stuff that Coinbase is doing to help ensure that there is infrastructure available that makes existing companies and their finance departments comfortable adopting stablecoin payments. That being said, though, to your point, there is the chargeback problem is something that's real in the sense that maybe you send a payment and it's fully atomic. There's no way for that to be reversed. The nice thing about dealing with microtransactions first, at least, is that if you lose 1 cent to 5 cents on some sort of interaction, it's not really the end of the world. In the same way that you have a review system on a platform like Craigslist or eBay or whatever, a reputation type of system will probably and already sort of pseudo exists within the X402 world, where if you are a legitimate seller providing a service, you're going to get good reviews. If you're just taking people's money without doing anything, it very quickly becomes obvious that that is the case, and there's no clear, sustainable long-term path for you to exist. And it's sort of natural market forces and dynamics working at scale means that there's not a lot of space for those fraudulent actors to play.
Okay, that makes sense. And a lot of the reason why microtransactions need to exist is for these agentic payments, right? So that's kind of predicated on the belief that agentic payments are going to blow up, that they're going to be very popular. And I feel like I've heard two sides of the coin on this one, where some folks believe that in an agentic future, all AI agents will have their own financials, they'll be able to execute transactions, and they'll have this level of independence. On the other side, I've heard that agentic payments are not going to be as popular for two main reasons. One, users are going to find it hard to trust agents and agentic payments. And two, that for organizations like AWS or Cloudflare, they may open up access to micropayments, but it doesn't create a net new revenue stream. And so they're not making any more money. So it doesn't make sense for them necessarily to push so hard on this unless all of their existing volume is going to transfer to AI agents. So it's a little bit of people thinking that AI agents aren't going to create that much economic value, and so it doesn't make sense for these organizations to spend so much time thinking about it. And so I wanted to hear from you whether you believe in the future of agentic payments, and if so, why?
Yeah, two is really interesting. I'll come back to that one. On one around like trusting an agent with your money, I think this is something that very similar to how we've seen the surge in self-driving cars come about. We're going to see the same sort of stages of progressive autonomy and increasing levels of user comfort that make it such that users are either delegating, $10, $20 to their agent at a time and not ever thinking about it again, or completely are oblivious to the fact that these agents are going off and paying for things. I think one really practical way that we see this play out today is people are, in some sense, already giving their agents access to money by topping up API credits. And in that regard, they're letting these agents go off and progressively run longer running loops, without even knowing if they're providing any value. But they are using that token, that API usage, just like gas in some sense.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see a very similar thing for agents as well. And I think the reason that this will start to manifest is because today, if you build an agent and you want to give it access to a specific service, say Exa AI for web search, you would have to go to their website, you would have to sign in, make an account, fund that account with a credit card, pay the fees associated with that, and then get a set of API keys that you go and give to your agent, and only then can it really start interacting. But with X402, the wallet that the agent owns is both the payment rail, but also a unique identifier. So it completely removes the need for a human to be in the loop for your agent to go off and pay and provision services. So in the same way that if you browse the internet without any access to money, the things that you're able to do are extremely limited, the same is true for agents. And giving them access to money is how you make them more financially independent and therefore able to be more autonomous. On point number two, I think that's a very good point around how agents may not be unlocking a net new revenue stream for these enterprises. And I think the enterprise story is something that still definitely has to be teased out a little bit further. The one thing I think that is working in the favor of agent payments working at scale is that this frictionlessness of these interactions inherently means that you're increasing your potential customer group to anyone who has a wallet, not necessarily just people who are aware of your service or otherwise know what they're doing to go create API keys and fund these accounts and credits and whatnot. Like the frictionlessness, I think, does open that up a little bit. And then also, too, generally the way that I think about this agent stuff starting to proliferate is in the 2010s, we had the shift from mobile to web. And that was really interesting, and it was unique because there were a lot of factors at play, people getting iPhones, cellular networks, whatever. But fundamentally, a human was still the one who was ultimately controlling things. In the 2020s, we're seeing the shift from mobile to agents, both in terms of chat bots becoming a primary interface, but also agents interacting at a scale and at a velocity that we haven't seen before. So for that reason, I think that people are going to be incentivized to adopt agentic payments, not necessarily because it's a new revenue stream, but it exponentially increases the revenue that they would be getting from existing customers because everyone is now moving at such a higher velocity with a fleet of agents surrounding them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's very valid where a lot of the organizations that are adopting agentic payments today, I think a large reason for that is they can't be late to the race because if they are, it's so easy to be outcompeted now.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets me really excited about the frictionless nature of agentic payments. I think for large organizations, that can actually be very bad, right? Because large organizations operate largely on trust, on reputation, and on users, right? Users having accounts, having that data, having history with the organization. But when you have these AI agents, especially ones with crypto wallets, they could spin up a new wallet and be a new unique identifier every single time. You don't have as much data on your users. And so that moat that these large organizations have created is starting to disappear. But that means it's really good for smaller organizations and startups, right? I think in Stripe's recent conference, they were talking about how there's been a huge rise in solo founders and solopreneurs, where they run entire businesses with one person and a team of agents. And I think that's so cool because one, it's not something that could have been done before. And two, it's possible to make something like that financially successful now because of the breadth and reach that you have through agentic payments. So I think that's really cool, but I do think that for large organizations, they're probably a little scared as to what that means for the future of their product, their company, and their moat as well.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think we're going to see the same thing play out, a bit of a tangent, but like app-specific or company-specific chains. I think there's a very compelling reason that every company will want to own their default settlement layer and execution rail. And then, of course, they're going to accept payments from everywhere else, but they're going to have benefits for doing it on their rails where they can get income from the stablecoin or own the ultimate layer where that happens. And I think the same thing's kind of true in a weird, pseudo-analogous way to agents and how companies are going to want to have an agent story. Every executive right now is being pressured top to bottom to figure out their AI story.
Yeah.
Whether that's a hype and it's a bubble or if it's a legitimate reason is kind of remains to be seen. But the fact of the matter is people are going to be releasing these AI products and integrating more and more every day.
Yeah, that's super interesting on the chain part as well. Obviously, very large chains have launched recently, like Robinhood Chain, app-specific chain. It's interesting, though, because I feel like there are open and permissionless networks that these chains could settle on, like Ethereum, which they still do if they're an L2. Why do you think that most applications will want to own their own chain, their own settlement layer?
I think the concept of a chain in and of itself has become commoditized. And I think everything that we've seen in the past really decade of crypto is the increasing commoditization of these public goods in some sense. And where, previously 4 or 5 years ago, you could call that like the Uni V2 contract, which has been forked a million different times on a million different chains, and every single one of those forks becomes increasingly less valuable in terms of the sort of equity structure, token structure, whatever. But the fundamental thing of being able to do a swap is just as valuable as it always was. Now I think we're seeing that with chains, where it's become so trivial to spin up your own L2, roll-ups of a service, whatever that might be, that there's really no reason for you as a company, especially a large entity, to be paying rent to anyone else. Like that was the exact reason Robinhood built their own chain. I think even if you do settle down to like one credibly neutral layer or whatever, and you're going to one interoperability between various different chains, it just feels inevitable that if you own your end user distribution and you own the customer relationship, there's no reason to not do your own chain.
Yeah. I've also seen some interesting stuff where when organizations launch their own chain, they change some of the things that are possible on that chain. Like blockchains have been around forever, and most new chains are just copying the systems that already existed on past blockchains. But if you're making your own chain for your own application, you actually have full customizability, right? It doesn't have to look exactly like Ethereum if that's not what's best for your business. So I've heard of ideas of blockchains where they don't allow permissionless peer-to-peer EOA to EOA transfers of funds. Because for an organization, if I'm a company, a business with a wallet, I don't want some random person sending me funds. And that's something you can do with your own chain, right? And your own wallet structure. So there's a lot of customizability and flexibility possible that I think organizations are not taking advantage of that they should, especially if they're going to launch their own chain.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Awesome. Well, the other product I wanted to talk about is one that you recently have been working on, which is with Advisor. So I'd love to learn more. What is Advisor? How does it work? And what's been the journey of building Advisor as well?
Yeah, totally. So the high-level context first, the idea of Coinbase Advisor is a AI advisor to help you manage your entire financial life. It exists within the Coinbase app, and the idea is that you can go into this chat interface and you can say something like, hey, this is my risk tolerance. You have access to my portfolio. Like, what should I do? How should I be investing? I have no idea what's going on. Help me figure it out. And the opportunity that's made available through the advisor is to take the concept of regulated financial advice, which has previously only been available to a select group of wealthy, high net worth individual users, and scale it to a wide audience of people. So we worked with the Coinbase asset management team and their portfolio managers to help fine-tune this model and this system prompt to generally provide recommendations well within what a traditional financial advisor would do, and do so with the level of scale that can reach all of the Coinbase app users. So ultimately, the thing that we think will play out here is that agents will completely disrupt the money management space. It'll be possible for you to just delegate your money to an agent, and it'll go off and handle it all for you. And we think the path to do that, especially within the Coinbase app surface, is by taking the regulated approach that makes everyone know that Coinbase is the safe, trusted place to get AI-driven financial advice.
That's awesome. And I think the advisor product is a regulated product, or it receives some kind of regulation, right? What does that mean, and why did you guys go and get that?
Yeah, so the way that it works is there's a corporate entity, Coinbase Advisors LLC, that is registered with the SEC and the CFTC to provide financial advice on equities, commodities, the whole gamut of things.
Yeah.
This approach is necessary because we're a pretty high-profile financial entity. We are owning the end-to-end relationship with the customer, and doing it in this regulated manner just follows the same sort of trust and safety and guidance principles that Coinbase have had since it started.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's cool to see that wealth management services can be available to everyone now, not just high net worth individuals, because it allows the upward mobility that a lot of people appreciate about being in an economic system that is open, that is permissionless, and that is equal access for everybody. So I think that's really cool to see. So with Advisor, can Advisor actually execute transactions on my behalf, or can it only provide advice on how I should allocate my portfolio?
So as of today, it is only able to provide recommendations, and then within the chat widget, it will provide you with whatever recommendations that it had. You could just tap to execute it, whether that be like a lend, staking, buying equities and crypto, whatever that package might be. It's like made very succinctly available for you directly within that app interface. The problem that we were initially trying to solve is that there's this orchestration gap that users have between their high-level, natural language semblance of an idea that they might have about finance, whether that be hyper-specific, like I want to go make a basis trade and I want to go do all this, that, and whatever, or very, very broad. I don't know what's going on. Help me invest in quantum computing. Any one of those things on that spectrum, users may have that high-level idea of what they want to do, but they don't necessarily have the time to go compose that trade, nor the expertise to know how to interact across different markets to ultimately express the position that they have in their head using financial primitives. So the whole idea of the advisor is to help make that possible. Hopefully, eventually, we can get to the point where that is all automated. You can do it fully discretionarily. But as of today, it requires a human in the loop for every single transaction.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. And I think that also plays well into that whole trust question that we were talking about earlier, too, where it's hard in today's day and age for people to trust agents or autonomous systems with their money. I think most folks probably manage their portfolio. If they actively manage it at all, they manage it manually, unless they have a very sophisticated setup. And so having this agent execute on your behalf is probably not something most consumers would be comfortable with yet. But in terms of the types of execution that Advisor can do, you were talking about like exposure to a basis trade, right? If I told Advisor I wanted to set up a basis trade, would it help me set up the basis trade myself, or would it point me to a strategy that executes a basis trade? And the reason why I asked this is I know that like delta neutral basis trade was very big probably last year or so. And there's a lot of ways you can get exposure to a delta neutral basis trade. But doing it yourself is really complicated. And managing that is also very complicated. Keeping track of funding rates and things like that is not something the average person can do.
Yep.
And so is that something Advisor could actually help me with? Or would it just show me products that can help me get exposure to a basis trade?
So today, if you asked in the app, I want to do a basis trade, and you were of a hypothetically high enough risk tolerance where it actually made financial sense for the advisor with its fiduciary duty to recommend that, it would just give you a widget that had your buy of spot crypto and then your short, perp short of whatever that other crypto might be. It would tell you the funding rate, it would let you execute it, but then you are responsible ultimately for monitoring that position, which is a huge pain. And it's something that will be solved over time. That's like actively being worked on as we speak.
That's super cool. Yeah, I know when I think Athena first got very popular, had tons of economic activity, a lot of people I know were looking into how can I run a basis trade myself, right? Why should I pay fees on this? And it's very complicated to try to manage that position, but it is actually very easy to automate if you have the technical skills to do so. But it does require a high level of both technical and financial understanding, which the average person would not have. But with AI today, I feel like that is something that we could get to. And so it's very cool that you can get access to basically a managed financial product like that eventually.
Yeah, and the sort of stopgap solution is to use our other agentic product, which is Coinbase for Agents. And the whole idea is that we think there's really a two-pronged way that AI adoption is going to occur over time. One is sort of like in-app experiences, like you can get with the advisor, which is trusted and safe and simple, but it also comes with its own inherent set of limitations that we've been talking about. But there's also the group of users who are more advanced and they want to just plug in existing products and services into whatever agent harness that they're interested in using and just use Coinbase as a pure execution rail. So say, for example, you wanted to plug into your Claude code. You have to be more specific with it, obviously, because it's not providing financial advice. If you say, I want to run a basis trade, if the funding rate falls below X%, or if I'm about to get liquidated, automatically handle it all for me, set it up. The whole idea of Coinbase for Agents is that it's basically just entirety of Coinbase, but for agents. So it can go off and it can make the trades responsible and required to execute that basis trade for you. So it's really the full spectrum of users and different compositions of financial products that are supported.
Okay, that makes sense. And is Coinbase for Agents something that I could interact with an interface, tell it what I want, and it would do that? Or is that something where I would have to build and deploy and manage an agent myself? Yeah,
so it's you can plug it into all the existing chat harnesses, ChatGPT, Claude, Claude Code, OpenClaw. Like you can go as simple or as advanced as you want. It's really just like an MCP behind the scenes. So it's just like APIs for agents pretty broadly adopted at this point. So it's, wherever you want it.
Okay, that's super cool. And just to end off on a future looking note, where do you see the future of either AI for portfolio management, for advisory, or AI in terms of agentic payments? Where do you see it going in the next year or 2 years?
I think we're going to see a very sticky, strong moment around agentic trading over the next 6 to 12 months. Payments have been a thing now for about 1.5 years, and that's been awesome. And there's a great set of enterprises who have legitimized this as a concept. The supply side that exists is fantastic, but we have yet to see real clear demand side. And I think until we have an invisible wallet and all your favorite chat harnesses where a user is making these agentic payments and doesn't even realize it and is having frictionless access across the web, or these agents are operating fully autonomously and running their own businesses and paying for LLC formation and accountants and all these different things, the demand side is yet to be really cracked. That being said, there's been a recent resurgence in just like general speculation across the market. And every time there's speculation, there's some fun new way to play around with that. And the latest, of course, is agentic trading and the ability to go give your agent a high-level mandate and have it executed on your behalf. We're seeing Robinhood do this. Coinbase is obviously also doing this as well. And it's getting some pretty good traction so far. Lots of trading volume, lots of interest. For the same reason that we see sort of like exponential increases in agent API calls for other services, we see the same with trading. And I think that one interesting loop that will start to happen is an agent will want to make the best trades possible. Mm-hmm. The best way to do that is to have access to premium data that no other agent has. Mm-hmm. And the best way to pay for that is to use X402. So the agent pays for access to premium data, uses that to make better trades, and then therefore the demand for premium data and differentiated data starts to increase as well. So I think that would be the first kind of like positive feedback loop that exists within like this very early nascent stage of the agentic economy. And we're announcing in like a couple of weeks that X402 payments will be possible directly from your retail app balance. So if you're just plugging in your Coinbase for Agents thingy, you can just immediately have your agent start like running this loop and seeing how well it works.
That is super awesome. And you actually answered a question that I was thinking when you were talking about that. Because as soon as you were talking about agents operating autonomously and trading, I was thinking, okay, that means they're also going to start doing research. What if I wanted them to trade a prediction market for me and learn everything that exists on the internet about that market? It could probably do that and make a concise decision on where I should place my trade on a prediction market. But then we're probably also going to see a world where people are trying to poison the data that these agents are using, you know, like putting fake news out there, putting data that the agent will latch onto, making fake trades, and then allowing other people to profit. So I think the data question is going to be a really big one over the next year or two.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting too because Vitalik kind of called this several years ago. He had this article about information finance where he hypothesized that even prior to AI agents being a thing, that agents would be the primary traders on low liquidity prediction markets because the cost for them to reason and analyze and then execute a trade with some level of opinionation is so small that it's going to be able to operate on markets where humans literally, like, it's not worth our time.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we're also going to see these agents in like an early area of differentiation or moat that can't necessarily be captured by any human anywhere.
Yeah. Wow, that's super awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today, Lincoln.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.